Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on 20 cable stations from Vermont to New York City and 24/7 on the internet at thestruggle.org. Featured on the program today, a talk by Jeff Bartos, a U.S. veteran of the war against Iraq. Bartos will be talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It can be very serious and it afflicts thousands of U.S. troops. In fact, a RAND study estimated 300,000 U.S. soldiers have PTSD. In May 2008, the director of the National Institute for Mental Health said that he thinks the number of people who die of suicides because of PTSD and depression might eventually outnumber the battle deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan. That would be 5,000 more deaths of veterans from Bush-Obama wars. We begin, however, with Palestine, an interview with Rick Colbeth-Hess about a new website, itisapartheid.org, where he explains how Israeli discrimination against the Palestinians amounts to the same kind of apartheid system that was inflicted upon blacks in South Africa in the bad old days. And after that, a short but important statement by Peace Mom Cindy Sheehan about Gaza and the Palestinian right to return. I'm speaking with Rick Colbeth-Hess of Cambridge, Massachusetts. We're going to talk about a website he's involved with, and it's called itisapartheid.org. Why don't you hold that up? Okay, first, where is apartheid?
There's apartheid in the occupied territories and in Israel itself. And we feel like it's an apartheid regime because separate is never equal. There are two separate systems, one for Palestinians and one for Israelis. There's separate roads, there's separate laws around who can be arrested. There's separate roads in the West Bank so that Israelis and Palestinians have to drive in separate roads. There's separate laws around labor issues. There's separate rights about visiting family. There's separate laws about marriage and family reunification. If you look at it systematically, it really comes down to it is an apartheid system in Israel and the West Bank.
Let's talk about that word apartheid, because a lot of people don't even remember where it came from originally. Well, what country did it start with?
It's an Afrikaner word that comes from the South African struggle. And what the South Africans did is that they gave the blacks little tiny homelands, or Bantustans. They gave them the right to vote in these little tiny homelands and then no rights in the rest of the country. And if you look at the West Bank, it looks exactly like the Bantustans in South Africa. They're little tiny islands where Palestinians live, and then they have no rights outside those islands.
Of course, South Africa got rid of its system in, I guess, the 90s.
After a long struggle against it, and we hope that there will be a struggle against apartheid in Israel and the occupied territories also.
Now, you've been to the area?
I've been to Israel and the West Bank 2 times.
What years, or around what time?
I went first 2 years ago. I took my son for his bar mitzvah, and he studied the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And then I went a second time to help in the struggle over there 1 year ago. So
you saw what you're describing as apartheid firsthand?
Oh, it was very clear with the 570 checkpoints in the West Bank, with Israeli soldiers humiliating Palestinians.
You saw people being humiliated?
I actually was with a Palestinian, and we were crossing a checkpoint, and a soldier pointed his gun at our heads, both of our heads, and told us to hit the ground. And then we had to hold up our passports above our heads. And while he sighted his gun right at our head in a military-style assault position.
What had been going on just before that?
Well, we were at a checkpoint. There were Israeli cars being waved right through. He identified me as being with a Palestinian, and that's all it took for him to aim his rifles at our head. And it's a terrifying experience, and they live it every day.
Where in the West Bank and Israel, just a few of the places you were at?
I went to Bethlehem, I went to Ramallah, I went to Nablus, I also went to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv.
Now what about, you talk about apartheid within Israel itself. I think a lot of people might be surprised about that.
Well, I urge you to go to the website and check it out. We have a whole page on the laws that are in Israel. There are 100,000 Palestinians who live in unrecognized villages. These were villages that were villages before the 1948 Nakba, before Palestinians were kicked out of their land. Palestinians stayed in these villages, and they have no rights to schools, drinking water, electricity. Basically, they get no services or any recognition. They're not on the map. So that's one example of apartheid in Israel. Other examples are there are different laws about marriage, reunification.
Could you give us an example about who people can marry? I think that's a big issue.
Well, Palestinians, if they want to marry somebody from the West Bank, they can marry them, but the person from the West Bank has no right to live in Israel whatsoever. And if an Israeli marries a Jew, or a Jew just wants to come because they want to come to Israel, they can come whenever they come. So they're two separate laws depending on who you are.
How about land and ownership of property within Israel?
I believe that a lot of the land is owned by the Jewish National Fund, and I think the law was recently overturned, but until very recently, Palestinians were not allowed to live on that land, and that is a good deal of the land. I think over 50% of the land in Israel. And Israel's a segregated society. Palestinians go to separate schools than Israelis, and I think they're given a fraction of the amount of funding for the Palestinian schools as the Israelis. So there really are two separate societies in Israel, separate and unequal.
So tell us more about the website, and you mentioned before a contest you're going to have.
Okay, we're going to have a video contest. The purpose of the website is about apartheid awareness, and it comes from the theory that really that people think about the Israeli and Palestinian issue in a certain way, especially Americans, because they're really only given one side of the story. And the way they think about it is in terms of security and terrorism. It's like their paradigm, their way of thinking. Apartheid is really a way for people to think about it differently. It gives them a different framework, and the laws do fit the international definition. There is an international definition of apartheid, so it does fit that definition. But we believe that through repetition, people actually change their minds. So one of the purposes of the website is to really have a repetitive phrase that we can say over and over again. And we use the example of conservatives said it's the liberal media over and over again at every level of consciousness. And most Americans now believe it's a liberal media when it's not. So we believe the way people change their thinking is A, with good information, and B, with a repetitive concept that they can grasp onto. The other purpose of the website is to give good information, and we feel like information about the truth about what's going on is blocked. And it's blocked through the mainstream media. I can't tell you the number of articles that I've been involved in situations that have not been run in the paper. So we believe that we have to transmit things virally. So part of the website is trying to transmit things virally. And the video contest is we're going to offer a $750 first prize, $500 second prize, and $250 third prize to develop a 2 to 3 minute video on apartheid awareness. And we hope that those videos will go viral and do something to create more awareness about what's going on in Israel and Palestine.